Hello and welcome to Fitwit MD. It is Saturday, January 16, 2021. We're just 2 weeks into the new year and we have a special program to you. We have very special guests that I'm going to introduce in just a bit, and we're going to be talking about South Asian inflammatory bowel disease, not just in the US but around the world, and how it relates to the COVID-19 and the vaccines that have emerged. Stay tuned. We have a great program and we hope to answer a lot of questions for you. Hello again, I'm Dr. Neilanjan Nandi. I'm a gastroenterologist and inflammatory bowel disease specialist here in the United States in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. We have a very interesting program for you guys today. We're going to be talking about South Asian inflammatory bowel disease, that's Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, and how it relates, how COVID-19 impacts our community. And we're hoping to answer some vaccines as well, vaccine questions as well. On the panel today, I want to introduce our two wonderful guests. We have Dr. Sumit Bhatia, who is a consultant gastroenterologist at Medanta in the Medicity Hospital, and the wonderful Aswani Omprakash of Own Your Crohn's. She's an IBD patient advocate. Gang, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Dr. Neil. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
It's truly my pleasure. There's always a lot of technical glitches coming into a program, but we pulled it off. We're doing it right now. As we're allowing people to go ahead and join us in the room, I want to encourage you that through the program, go ahead and type your questions that you have about South Asian inflammatory bowel disease, or about questions you have about COVID-19 or the vaccines that have been developed. I understand that those vaccines are being made available as early as today in India. So why don't we go ahead and get started into our program? I'll ask you, Dr. Bhatia, how has this experience been with COVID-19 for you as a gastroenterologist in India amongst your IBD patients?
So I don't think it was much different from what you guys experienced it in US. Nightmarish when it began. Everyone was scared. The doctors were scared. The patients were scared. More so our IBD patients who are especially on immunosuppressants. We didn't know, which way this pandemic was going to turn and how these patients are going to behave and whether they will be able to continue the medications, whether the risk of COVID-19 is more in these patients. So it was a terrible thing to start with. But thankfully, the scientific community, the IBD community has risen up to the occasion. And we have now strong, solid data to say that COVID-19 did not turn out to be as bad as we thought it will, in IBD patients. In fact, many of our patients have done really well, and it has given us a very good opportunity to develop something which I think we were completely lacking in terms of telemedicine. And there were so many unnecessarily hospital visits, which we could manage through these telemedicine visits. The re-prescriptions and the refills of the medicines. The patients have found new ways to, handle their disease and, handle their medications much better. We as clinicians have realized the futility of so much of unnecessary things which we were doing. And now we, over a period of last 1 year, we are more wiser now as to because of this COVID-19, and we have realized that the medications which we were all very scared about, especially the anti-TNF agents, especially here in South Asia and in India, where the risk of other infections also was very high. We have realized, we have warmed up to the idea that that these medications are not actually so bad.
100%.
Thanks to the secure IBD data. Which has come up with all this information.
Yeah, we're going to talk about secure IBD and the wonderful work those clinicians have done to provide our patient safety. But just to kind of recap, I echo the same sentiments as Dr. Bhatia, as a gastroenterologist here in the States, is that, the beginning of the pandemic, we were very conservative, very protective of our patients. And it's refreshing to have real evidence-based data that allows us to breathe a sigh of relief. And I hope that you, if you're a patient or you're a clinician or a family member, will also find some great relief that we're in a much better place as IBD patients, that we're not at a high at-risk population as you might think. And 2021, no matter what, is full of a lot of hope. Tina, what's been your experience like, from the beginning of the pandemic to now, a year has gone by as a patient?
That's a great question, Dr. Nandi, and thank you for summarizing, Drs. Nandi and Bhatia, just the experience from the clinician side. As a patient, I was terrified going into the pandemic initially. So come March, my doctor was telling me, hunker down, you have not only IBD, you have asthma, you have severe allergies, like this could become a big problem, stay home. So I was doing whatever I could to, make sure that I was safe, my family was safe. Of course, I'm still following all of these precautions. But I think my mind is a little bit more at ease now, knowing and having heard some of the robust data that's been coming out of studies about how IBD patients are not necessarily faring worse than the average population with COVID-19. So, I was very concerned about how my biologic might affect outcomes around COVID-19. And I'm looking forward to us speaking a little bit more about that. So, Dr. Bhatia, I wanted to sort of ask you at this point, how do IBD medications affect COVID-19 outcomes in IBD patients in India? What have you seen? What has your experience been?
Thank you for asking that, Tina. So as I actually said in the beginning, that it has made us wiser, the whole COVID-19 experience. So in my experience, and even in the data which is available now in most of the journals, most of the patients have tolerated their medications really well. And we were very much scared about our patients who were on biologics, whether they're going to have severe disease or whether they're at risk to develop, contract this infection more commonly than the rest of the population. But thankfully, that has not been the case. So we haven't had many patients with IBD contracting this infection. So I would say it has been almost similar to like in the general population, with only very occasional patients turning out to be COVID positive. And thankfully, whatever patients I have seen in my clinic, they haven't had a very severe disease. The disease was pretty mild to begin with, and we could continue their medications as it is, except for the fact that we in India rely heavily upon immunomodulators. So during that COVID illness phase for 2 weeks, so we had to withhold their immunomodulation. But most of the patients, except for the ones who were on biologics, they had to skip a dose of biologic, and then subsequently we could give them the dose within 2 weeks once they recovered.
Fair enough. And Dr. Nandi, are you generally saying something similar in the US? What has sort of your protocol been with regards to medication and COVID-19 and IBD patients?
Yeah, so very similar, same type of guidelines essentially. We consider all the medicines to be very safe. There are some exceptions. So, and we also have to differentiate at what point we're talking about the safety of the medicine for you, which is, do you actually have COVID-19, right? If you do not have COVID-19, which is the disease, the virus, SARS-CoV-2, you could have tested positive but not have developed symptoms. So you're either healthy, no COVID, no virus, or you have the virus, you tested positive but no symptoms, or you have symptoms, right? And that's important to understand. So if you're healthy, by and far and large, the majority of our patients are doing very, very well, and they're not getting exposed because they're social distancing. So in that case, we do not encourage patients to discontinue any of their medicines. If you are on prednisone, specifically, prednisone, being very, very powerful immunosuppressant, we recommend lowering the dose of prednisone to the least amount, or if possible, trying to convert to budesonide, which is minimal systemic immunosuppression, really just acts topically at a specific site of the intestine. So most medicines can be kept going if you have IBD without any issue. just the prednisone is the concern. Now, if you test positive and don't have symptoms, there is some gray zone there, and you want to talk to your doctor, because testing positive, we know up to 80% of people are asymptomatic carriers, okay? And so we know that includes our IBD patients. So if you test positive, you want to talk to your doctor about, is it necessary to hold any of your medicines for up to 2 weeks to see if you develop symptoms. Many patients will not need to in my practice, and I have just kept in very close contact with them on a regular basis to ensure that they're not developing symptoms so that we don't skip or miss a treatment. And then, of course, if you do develop the virus and the infection, that's a different, unique scenario, right? Where, again, a tailored conversation between you and your medical professional about whether your therapy should be discontinued. And as Dr. Bhatia mentioned, several of our TNF agents specifically may have actually demonstrated that IBD patients on those medicines may actually have done better than individuals who weren't on the medicine. Now, we still need to study that phenomenon of TNF and COVID response a lot further. So again, everybody's different. And this is the one thing that I'm sure we all three can agree. No IBD patient is unique. Even though we simplify your diagnosis to a label, everyone's different. So always talk to your doctor.
Fair enough. That's a great point, Dr. Nandi. I wanted to ask you both, and I'll start with Dr. Bhatia. Now, we know that COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 rather, is very much a respiratory infection, but there have been other sort of symptoms that we've been hearing a lot about, gastrointestinal symptoms. Can both of you tell me a little bit about some of those symptoms, what patients need to look out for, and how perhaps to be treating some of these? Dr. Bhatia, if you don't mind starting.
Yeah, so COVID-19 has been a great mimicker. And many of our patients have actually presented, even the non-IBD patients, they have presented with the gastrointestinal symptoms. Some of them presented only with nausea, loss of taste. Many of them presented with diarrhea, vomiting, and hardly any respiratory symptoms. And this information came in pretty early during the pandemic that gastrointestinal symptoms can be a manifestation of COVID infections. But then again, with our field of work, it was very difficult to differentiate between an IBD patient reporting diarrhea and a normal patient reporting diarrhea. So we were pretty aggressive with testing in almost all the IBD patients. So any patient with any symptoms of flare or worsening of symptoms, we tried to get them tested as soon as possible. That was one thing. Second thing was there has been data now from India also. Dr. Vishal Sharma from PGI Chandigarh has recently published that almost 25 to 30% of their patients had only GI symptoms with COVID-19 rather than anything else. So it was, there is a significant overlap between the IBD symptoms and COVID-19. So does that answer your question?
Very interesting. Yes, absolutely. How are you sort of treating some of these symptoms? Are you doing anything special? Because something that I've been hearing a lot about, because I myself have not thankfully contracted COVID-19 yet, but many patients are saying that they have lingering symptoms for the next few months of diarrhea or incontinence, even breathing issues. How are you sort of handling this as a gastroenterologist in India?
So Tina, at my center, what we have been practicing is any patient who is coming to hospital with symptoms and requires inpatient care, all of them get tested. So any IBD patients who's coming with worsening symptoms of diarrhea or incontinence and requires inpatient care, we upfront had asked for a COVID RT-PCR testing. And once we know that they are not COVID positive, then we treat them similar to any other IBD patient, except for the fact, like Dr. Nandi mentioned, that steroids we were a little hesitant to use unless and until we had good reasons to say that they will help out the patient. And unfortunately, in India, we don't have the MMX preparation of budesonide, so we had to rely on prednisolone in patients who had flare. But then, any patient with IBD flare, the IBD flare took precedence. And thankfully, we didn't have many IBD patients contracting COVID. Most of the patients which I saw, which our unit saw, were asymptomatic carriers and were incidentally detected. As far as your other part of the question is concerned about the lingering symptoms, so many of the patients who were COVID positive, not necessarily the IBD patients, the most common symptom which we have been seeing is a kind of a fatigue, and some of them having lingering respiratory symptoms in spite of getting a COVID negative results and recovering well from COVID. And these were the patients who had actually the severe disease, whose CT scans showed the extensive damage by this respiratory virus. But thankfully, the IBD patients didn't have much of symptoms to begin with.
Fair enough. Now, Dr. Nandi, I sort of wanted to ask you on the US side, have you been seeing a lot of GI symptoms in South Asian American and American IBD patients who are contracting COVID? And have you seen a lot of lingering symptoms? And how are you sort of treating those?
Yeah, so I have had reported a few patients. I've had an okay number of patients who have actually had COVID or tested positive for COVID. And by the way, I encourage everyone to go ahead and submit their COVID cases, if you're a clinician, to the Secure IBD registry. You can go to secure-ibd.org and submit a case. Literally takes like 3 minutes to submit a case. You don't need a lot of information. But my patients, most of the patients that I've had have actually had very, very mild disease. So I can't say that I've had a lot of patients who have had severe COVID. Most have been minimal and have recovered. And many were actually just exposed and tested positive and never developed the actual COVID-19 disease itself. I do have, maybe 2 or 3 patients, that's it, who have had lingering symptoms. However, because enough time has passed, we've been able to scope, and 2 of those 3 have maintained mucosal remission, meaning the healthy lining of the intestine. So we think that there might be other components that might be contributing to their symptoms, like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. We don't think it's active COVID virus, creating their symptoms now. And the third actually has had still active inflammation, but they were someone already prior to this pandemic who's had some more challenging inflammation to treat. Fortunately, we have a plan for them. So in all 3 of those cases, I personally cannot say from my actual experience that it's from the COVID itself that's continuing to mediate these symptoms. Now, that said, we have a whole issue, the American Journal of Gastroenterology, the Red Journal, dedicated to COVID-19 manifestations of the GI and liver tract. So it's not that COVID-19 does not cause GI illness or even liver illness. It does. But as far as how long those symptoms last, I don't know. Pulmonary symptoms, we know at baseline can last a long time for some people. The long haulers is what we call them. I don't have a personal patient who's had to suffer that, which is refreshing to me, right? That my IBD patients haven't had to go to that severe a length of disease.
That makes sense, and it's comforting to hear that from both of you. Sorry, Dr. Bhatia, you were saying?
Can I add something?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So
Please.
I think that question also came from the fact that the COVID-19 virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, was supposed to infect GI tract much more commonly because of the receptors involved. There was a lot of scientific information which was being bombarded to everyone because of the receptors, and everybody was worried because that the IBD patients will fare worse. But I would say that thankfully that hasn't happened, and we are glad that it didn't. The symptoms have been, the disease have been pretty mild in at least the patients which I have encountered with, and most of them were asymptomatic carriers, so no lingering symptoms there.
And I just want to take a moment. We keep talking about Secure IBD. I just wanted to share that with our colleagues here. Let me see if I can get back to those slides real quick. I did have this Secure IBD website pulled up, and I just want people to be able to go there so that they can actually see it. But it's secure-ibd.org. Again, this is a secure database where you can actually access an international app. Ooh, seems to be a little slow. I'll get that working, guys. I'm sorry. But anyways, you can go there and you can go to that website. They actually have a map of the entire world and all the cases that are reported, and you can actually access and see by country and even by region in some cases where the COVID has been reported. Also on that website, if you are somebody who's trying to research the internet for the best information, they have some publications on their data that are available for you to read, so you can learn about what they know about IBD illness as it relates to COVID.
Exactly, and that's such a good point, Dr. Nandi. Like what we're doing is we're trying to encourage all patients to speak to their doctors about reporting to this database so that we can have the most robust data available, and we can see how IBD patients are faring. That's how we have all this information from the last 10 months or so. Just moving forward now, so some exciting news today. India has launched their vaccination campaign, and I believe that there's two main vaccines that are being considered in India. And on the other end, in the US, we launched our vaccine campaign last month. And we have two other vaccines available here. So one of the focuses of this discussion is really to understand how these vaccines work, so that patients can make the best decisions possible in their care, and really talk to your own GI doctors about what they're thinking, but also to sort of understand what mRNA is for the patients in the Western world who are getting mRNA vaccines or being asked to consider them, and then what vaccines are available in India. I believe there's two. There's Covaxin and Covishield. So Dr. Bhatia, I actually wanted to start with you, since this is very exciting news that we're hearing today about the vaccine campaign being launched. Can you talk to us a little bit about Covaxin versus Covishield, and what, I realize it's very early right now, but there are patients who have come forward and said they are on the front lines in India and are being asked to be vaccinated, and some of these patients have IBD. So we wanted to give them a little bit more clarity. If you don't mind just talking a little bit about these vaccines and what the initial thinking is regarding IBD patients, please.
So, thank you, Tina. Thank you for bringing that in. Yes, today is actually a landmark day. India has started its vaccination drive this morning against this pandemic. So there are two vaccines which have been licensed as of now in India. The first one is Covishield. The Covishield is the same vaccine which has been developed by the Oxford group. So it's an Oxford AstraZeneca combined effort. So it's a recombinant vaccine. It utilizes adenovirus which infects chimpanzees. So that's why it's called ChAdOx1, and it carries a part of the spike protein and induces an immune response from the human body. So this is very, very different from the mRNA technology vaccines which are available in the United States. So let me just tell you about Covishield. So the Covishield data is there in the public domain. The Oxford group published their data in Lancet this last December 2020, and the results regarding the efficacy of the vaccine, which means how much it's going to protect our patients, varies between 62 to 90%, and on an average 70% efficacy, which is supposed to be a good efficacy rate. It's not as good or as robust as 95% of Moderna or Pfizer vaccines, but then nevertheless 70% is a good efficacy rate, I would say. The more concerning part, which every patient nowadays is asking us, is whether these vaccines are safe to take. So Covishield has reasonable, safety data amongst almost the data which was published was almost for 13,000 patients, and now I think they have touched around 23,000. So there is good amount of safety data available for Covishield, and except for a few demyelinating, incidents that happened in almost 3 patients out of 13,000, there has not been much of, too many adverse events. Now, having said that, I'll tell you the fact. The the fact is that the patient population which was enrolled for the trial purpose uh, did not have an immunocompromised group. So, considering that, whether I can safely say that we have definite data to say whether these are absolutely safe in any patient who's immunocompromised patient is still not available there as yet. But in general population, the vaccine has been found to be very safe. So as of now, if somebody asks me, if my patients are asking me if they are being offered Covishield, I would say please go ahead and take it. There is no major risk in taking that, and efficacy is reasonably good enough. Now, the second part, the second vaccine which we are talking about is Covaxin, which the Indian government has given an emergency approval for, is actually a killed vaccine. So, killed vaccines traditionally are supposed to be very safe because it's just the killed components from the virus and which induces an immune response, and they don't have much of side effects. But having said that, the fact again remains that we only have the phase 1 and 2 data available to us right now to say that, what is the efficacy and what is the safety. The phase 3 data will be available to us, pretty soon, because there has been almost 26,000 patient data which is being collated right now as we speak. Uh, that that will tell us really about the efficacy in real world and the safety part of it. But I think we are still, possibly a month or two away from the of data. But as soon as it is available and it has been shown to be safe, I would recommend everybody to just go ahead and take it. The main advantage being both the vaccines are indigenously produced. They are being manufactured here in India. The costing is is much less, and it's affordable to almost everyone. And if we have good safety and efficacy data for Covaxin as well, then we'll have two vaccines which are actually efficacious and safe. So, to cut a long story short, as of now, Covishield, we have data, reasonably safe, reasonably efficacious. So, if the patients are being offered that, I would not hesitate to, advise for everyone to just go ahead and take it. Covaxin, um, if you ask my personal opinion, I will take it. I will advise my patients to take it. But if you ask me scientifically, I still don't have published data to say that it is safe. So we may have to wait for a little while, and I think by the time it reaches general population, we will have that data as well.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for clarifying all of that. Now, just quickly, Dr. Bhatia, one follow-up question that I've been hearing a lot. I know many patients in India are on azathioprine, some form of immunosuppression, more so than biologics. Is this going to be a contraindication? Meaning, is this a problem for patients who want to take the vaccine? Is there going to be any lost efficacy? What sort of have you learned from other vaccines that you might want to share regarding Covishield or Covaxin and the use of immunosuppression?
So Tina, our experience has been in IBD with and other vaccines, except for the live vaccines, which we are not using in these patients. There are no vaccines which we ask our patients not to take. So same with COVID-19. I think all of us have gone through kind of a hell in last 1 year, dreading this disease. And
Yes.
now once the vaccines are available, it will be very, almost it's sinful to be on the stand that don't take vaccines. And it's a 1 year old disease. Let me just put it in in common layman terms, and keep the science out of it. It's a 1 year old disease. The vaccines are
Yeah.
possibly what is there in US is barely 2 months old. The Oxford data has come, not even, it's not been a month since its publication, and
Yep.
we are talking about life and death here. So if there is reasonable data, if the technology is reasonable, and if you believe in science, I would not deny a vaccine. And patients being on azathioprine, I don't think it's a contraindication, because both the vaccines which are right now available in India are kind of the safe technologies. Recombinant vaccines we have been using since ages, and killed vaccine I don't think poses any challenge in terms of immunosuppression. So if somebody has to take a message down from here right now, that's why I put in the facts in front of you. I'm not hiding any data or supporting a company. The point is, Covaxin, I still don't have data. Whatever data is there is from phase 1 or 2 trials. That means it's from the animal studies. And it has been shown to be efficacious there. Once we have the phase 3 data, I don't think there is any reason for anybody to be skeptical about these vaccines and not take them. Okay.
Great points. Thank you so much, Dr. Bhatia. Now, Dr. Nandi, switching gears a little bit, the mRNA vaccines by Pfizer and Moderna have been spoken widely about in the Western world, but also in some parts of the Eastern world. And I know we have some patients here from all over. So I want to make sure that we also cover what mRNA technology is. And obviously, we've talked about the efficacy rate being between 90-95%. And I wanted to understand your perspective on vaccination with immunosuppression and biologicals.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you asked, because there's a lot of different things that are floating around about the vaccine. But I have to applaud Dr. Bhatia. I totally agree with him. There's no reason not to vaccinate for the majority of our patients, with one or two exceptions that I'll cover. We talked about one of them, about prednisone, and then there's a second set that I want to address as well. I'll kind of pull up the slides just to talk about what the mRNA vaccine is. And mRNA vaccine is just a portion. It's a code. Okay, it's not DNA. DNA is a double-stranded ladder. mRNA is one side of the ladder, not both. And it's actually, it encodes a protein. It actually, in this case, codes one of 25 proteins that are critical to the COVID virus itself getting into the cell. So not all 25 are there, and not the entire virus, just one protein called the spike protein. So your cells, literally, once you get the vaccine injected, you uptake the mRNA. That mRNA never ends up in your DNA, ever, not once. And then once it's in your DNA, once it's in your cell takes the mRNA, makes the spike protein itself. Your cells in your body express the spike protein. It does nothing else. But your body is so remarkably intelligent, it knows that protein doesn't belong there. And so your body makes an antibody against anything that exhibits that spike protein. So within 2 to 3 days of getting the vaccine, excuse me, the mRNA virus is actually gone. Your body totally degrades it. But in the meantime, you've developed antibodies. Now you need that second dose. It's critical, because you're triggering not only the cells that make antibodies, but you're also, with that second dose, triggering the memory of T cells, which are other types of cells in your body that actually remember and will physically go up to any cell expressing the spike protein to kill it. Now, this is really important because excuse me, we have a new variant actually that we picked up in the UK, and that variant is thought to be 70% more transmissible. But fortunately, it is just as susceptible to the vaccine. It has the same spike protein. So this virus vaccine that we have, both of them actually will cover us for the new strain. As of yesterday, the CDC, at least in the States, only reported 76 cases in America reported of the new strain. And actually by March, it's thought to be the new dominant strain, which is pretty incredible. It just goes to show that it's probably here much longer than we know, and more people have it. But fortunately, this vaccine targets all those coronaviruses. So hopefully that answers as to what the vaccine is and what it isn't. Did that answer some of your questions, Tina?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the concern that I've been hearing from patients in the IBD world is, okay, so I understand this vaccine exists. there isn't, patients are concerned about like long-term safety, which of course we don't have the data on, but I sort of wanted to bring up not only the biologics and the immunosuppression piece, Dr. Nandi, which I know you'll go over, but also I wanted to say, I know you've gotten the vaccine. So I wanted to sort of highlight the fact that, you've gotten it, and I wanted to have you sort of share, that your experience as a healthcare hero and as a frontline worker.
So I actually just got my second dose of the Pfizer vaccine a week ago. And I was very humbled to get the vaccine at all. I wanted to give it to my family instead, but I had my shot and I took it because I take care of so many patients. And anyways, my first dose, I had a little mild soreness of the arm, barely anything to speak of. The second dose, though, about 12 hours later, I did feel a little ill. I had some fevers, rigors, shakes. I wish I had hydrated even more. I ended up hydrating quite a bit with water. And I wish I had also taken some acetaminophen or Tylenol, because I know I can take that. And that definitely helped with any of the fevers that I had. But I was happy I got the vaccine, because even though I felt like crud for a good 6 hours the next day, it was the vaccine working. That was telling me, I was like, all right, this thing is doing something, right? My immune system is revving up and generating that cytokine storm, so that when the real thing ever comes my way, boom, my body is going to attack it and get rid of it. So I'm happy I got it. I'm blessed. And I do want to take this moment to thank all the scientists, all the clinicians, and all the 30,000 plus patient volunteers who did the trials here in the States. Thank you. Because without you being a true hero, right, putting your life forward, right, the rest of us, the countless billions of the world, we wouldn't have a chance if you hadn't, stepped up to be a part of those trials. So really, on behalf of all, healthcare workers across the globe, thank you so much. You guys are the real health heroes, in my opinion.
So Dr. Nandi, are you recommending this vaccine to your patients? And I very much appreciate you elaborating on your personal experience, because I think that's so incredibly necessary for us to hear. What are your thoughts for your patients?
So for my patients, I'm encouraging them to go ahead and get the vaccine whenever possible, whenever it becomes available in their local jurisdiction. Our patients are they are immunocompromised, but they're not to the degree that this vaccine, in my opinion, is going to harm them, okay? I want all my patients to get vaccinated because it will give them much more comfort and safety. I am really not concerned about the majority of our medicines at all. The only patients that I think, I mentioned patients on steroids we have a concern, not that it's harmful to get the vaccine. No, the concern is that if you're on prednisone and you get the vaccine, that prednisone is suppressing the immune system enough that your body is unable to mount the appropriate antibodies, right? Because we're blunting that part of the immune system. So it's not that getting a vaccine on prednisone is as harmful, it's just it's not going to help you. So we'd rather you get it when you're on a low dose or not at all on prednisone. The second population, and this is not an at-risk population, but we need to study them more, are women of childbearing age or those who are pregnant or who may be breastfeeding. The fact of the matter is, for many historical and political reasons, those pregnant or breastfeeding women haven't been included in vaccine trials, and I have my own issues with that. But we do not have enough data because it wasn't studied in those patients. Now, it is being studied. There are databases being accumulated now. We do not believe that the vaccine, because it's degraded just like that within a few days by your cytoplasm, your cells, we do not believe that it's harmful to mothers. We don't believe it's harmful to conception, and we don't believe or know that it's transmissible in breast milk. If anything, we think that if a mother gets it and generates protective antibodies, that she can pass those protective antibodies on to her child. That said, if you were to hold me on stage and I said, do you have data for this? We don't. So ultimately, I think it comes down to a mother's independent decision, what she feels is safe for her own body and her child. And that's a very personal decision to consult with herself, her family, her physicians, both her IBD physician and her OB-GYN. on that matter, I did want to comment. I'm trying to pay attention to some of the questions our audience is asking, and one of the questions came from a wonderful person. I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but she said that her allergy immunologist, you know who you are, and I love you, by the way. Her allergy immunologist said to have some concern about getting the vaccine, and her IBD physician said to get it. So very conflicting arguments there. And one of our other audience members, who's wonderful too, Lori, said, have them talk, right? In this day and age, there should be no reason why your clinicians can't talk. And the more they talk together and then communicate, loop back with you, the more confident you're going to feel. And then the better that your IBD physician recommending the vaccine likely, and your immunologist who, for a unique situation, unique to you, is not, they can understand and say, oh, you know what, I didn't know that, or now I know this, and they can help you make a better informed decision. So until that conversation has happened, I wouldn't rule yourself as a candidate for the vaccine out.
I agree with that, Dr. Nandi. That's an interesting point because I spoke to my allergy immunologist because I have very severe allergies and asthma, as I've mentioned earlier, and she was all for it. So, and my GI is all for it. So it's interesting to hear the different opinions. I would definitely encourage, as a patient, that we encourage our providers to speak, even if we have to coordinate that conversation, make it happen. I'm all about making sure that my providers speak, exchange emails, however it needs to be done, because this is extremely important for us. As Dr. Bhatia, Dr. Nandi have been saying throughout, vaccination is key for IBD patients. Now, Dr. Bhatia, Dr. Nandi, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about something that I've been hearing from, like a concern I've been hearing from IBD patients. Is there any risk of these vaccines worsening their disease or causing IBD flares? I think this is one of the things that patients keep asking me as an advocate. So I wanted to clarify that with you. Dr. Bhatia, if you don't mind starting.
So, yeah. So, Tina, let me just put it this way. When I tell and talk about Covaxin not having published data as yet, there is no data to the statement which you just made. So, whosoever is, propagating that kind of a statement is again just talking through their hat. There is absolutely no evidence that a vaccine can precipitate an IBD flare. So please, from your group, from Dr. Nandi's platform, if this message can go out, that there is absolutely no evidence that vaccine can worsen a person's IBD. I think that's just completely a myth.
That's what I thought. And Dr. Nandi, do you mind adding your thoughts to that?
No, 100%. There's no reason to suspect that this vaccine is going to harm you in any way, shape, or form. It's a safe vaccine, and we know the science behind it. I want everyone to think back to the big picture. You have three advocates here in front of you, encouraging you to understand and trust science. And at least here in the States, this is my own personal opinion. The views I express are only my own. But we oftentimes, I saw this pandemic unfold like a bad Hollywood movie. A Hollywood movie, one of those climate disaster changes, an asteroid's coming, a tsunami is coming, a flood is coming. And throughout the entire movie, they consult the scientists. And the last person they listen to is the scientist until the very end, and the scientists come and save the day. And that's what happened here. The only thing about real life is we didn't listen to the scientists soon enough, fast enough, and yet they have come to our rescue. This vaccine is been very well studied. And do you all mind if I just go ahead and maybe share some common myths and misconceptions that I've heard? Would that be all right with you guys? Why don't I switch gears here? So some of the things, and we've covered some of these already, but common misconceptions. The vaccine was developed too fast. And that's just not true. That's not true. The vaccine development actually began over 30 years ago into mRNA vaccine technology. And because of SARS and MERS in the early 2000s, at least here, the vaccine research for coronaviruses specifically was begun 10, 11 years ago. And this type of vaccine development is so sophisticated, it's not like any other vaccine you've likely had. It's like if you know what you need to target, you program the code, the code's the mRNA, and boom, you have a vaccine. It's literally that breakthrough, that innovative. So I just want people to understand that it just didn't start developing last year. And also, for the safety trials, there's certain endpoints where there's independent review boards that are built within the country's Federal Drug Advisory Board, we call it the FDA, and there's also an independent advisory board of career scientists and epidemiologists who independently also verify. And none of these stages was ever cut short, not once. And also, we didn't sacrifice the volume of patients that needed to be enrolled. Again, 30,000 plus just in our country, and then tens of thousands of more across the globe for other vaccines that have been in development. So again, this is entirely false, okay? The second myth is COVID-19 vaccine is a live virus. I think we've covered that, right? Dr. Bhatia and Tina have mentioned that this is not a live virus. It is a mRNA vaccine, and other vaccines may be inactivated. So there's no live virus being offered or injected. And that's very important because the vaccine is not going to cause you illness if you have a reaction like I did, right? After my second dose, which is common enough, more common than the first dose. That's actually your body revving up. And I want you to remember this when we ask you to get your influenza vaccine or any other vaccine. If you get ill, it made me sick. You bet it did. It made you sick, but not as sick as you would be if you got the real thing. So this is actually the protective immunity that your body is demonstrating. The vaccine is effective. So moving on, I only have two more that I wanted to cover here with you guys. The vaccine embeds into my DNA, and I have heard this a lot. This is false. It's an mRNA. It's a single strand that never enters your nucleus. In fact, the body's own cellular processes destroy the vaccine, and you're not going to have this left over in your body at all. You will be left with good protective immunity. And then the last one here that I have is, I don't need to get vaccinated. If everyone else gets vaccinated, things will be just peachy keen and fine. And I see my panel here shaking their head. That's not true, right? We need to, if you don't get vaccinated and this person doesn't, then what happens is the vaccine propagates and it has hosts to grow in and to spread more. But if all of us here in this virtual room and across the globe get vaccinated, then guess what? The vaccine doesn't have hosts to breed in because you have antibodies, right, from the vaccine that extinguish it, so it cannot continue to propagate. So that's why we don't need 100% of people, although it would be nice to be vaccinated. We need the bulk of our population to be vaccinated so that it can die out and therefore not exist even in pockets where there's not enough people vaccinated. So very, very important that everyone actually get vaccinated so that you can actually have good health.
Absolutely. Such great points, Dr. Nandi. And I think what you just described is a concept we call herd immunity. And getting vaccinated makes sure that we are protecting ourselves, but also protecting one another. So I've heard a lot of IBD patients say over and over again, but if everybody else is getting vaccinated, why do I need to? No, we have to do our part in the sense that if we get vaccinated, if others get vaccinated, that means that we are all protecting each other. And from my understanding, and Dr. Bhatia, I would like you to chime in on this as well, from the scientists in the US, we have been hearing that we might need up to 90% of people to get vaccinated for this herd immunity to really kick in. So, Dr. Bhatia, I wanted to ask your thoughts a little bit on herd immunity and the vaccines that are coming out in India.
Before that, Tina, Dr. Nandi, I wish you could have been in my medical school as my teacher. You explained the concept of herd immunity so well. That was fabulous. So
thank you very much. Thank you.
Voila, I just wanted to shout, voila, that's what we call as herd immunity, right? So to achieve herd immunity, the herd needs to be immune to a disease. So the entire population, as much as 90% people, once they are vaccinated, there won't be as many hosts left for the virus to propagate. And that's the whole idea. So it's extremely important for an individual to get vaccinated and not think, that it's someone else's job. It's our job. We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect our families. We have to protect our community. And if nothing else, I think this pandemic has shown everybody that, alone we would have just perished. I would not have survived possibly. We have survived only because, the communities have worked together during lockdown phases, during hospital shutdowns. Everybody could survive only because everybody was trying to work it out together. So at this point of time, I think it's a very selfish thought if someone believes that I will not get vaccinated, let my other colleagues and let my other friends get vaccinated. Anyways, I'll be protected. No, you will be not, because there'll be, uh, let me use the word, there'll be more idiots like you, and who will not get vaccinated. And finally, finally, you will defeat the entire purpose of our scientists working so hard, working their asses off and, developing all this at a breakneck speed. I really would urge everybody, as and when it's available to you, and if you are reasonably convinced by your doctors and by the science data which is available, in public domain, that please go ahead and vaccinate yourselves.
100%, Dr.
I
Bhatia. I
think
mean,
that's such
we,
a
we can't
strong
agree
message.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah, such a strong message. I appreciate that. Now, Dr. Bhatia, there was a question that was asked about sort of the vaccine monitoring that will be happening in India. So, just to give some clarification, in around the world, the secure IBD database, like Dr. Nandi and I've mentioned, is something that's really allowed for us to track COVID and COVID cases in IBD. As far as IBD patients getting vaccinated, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation has something called IBD Partners, which all patients around the world can sign up for. It's called IBD Partners via the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, and we can certainly share a link with you all. And what that does is it's recording patient outcomes with the vaccine. So whether you're receiving RNA, Covaxin, Covishield, whatever you're receiving, you will be able to, in the next few weeks, input your data and how you fared as an IBD patient with regard to the COVID vaccines available in your country. My understanding in the US is with the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, they have an app for patients to report any adverse events, any side effects. It's called the V-Safe app. Is there something similar like this in India? I'm hearing something about a COVID-19 app out of India. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about what you might know about that, as well as sort of the process for IBD patients to get this vaccine. Do they have to apply? Is there some sort of tiered system in India like there is in the US? Just wanted to get some color on that, Dr. Bhatia.
So yeah, Tina, you have heard it right. There is something called as a CoWIN app, which has been developed by the government. The thing is, the CoWIN app software right now is like a backend software. It's being utilized by the authorities and the government agencies to collate the data so that they can roll out, they can roll out the vaccination program and get it moving. But soon it's supposed to be made available to public as well, wherein an individual person can download it from the App Store or from the Google Play Store, and then upload their own data so that they are able to receive vaccines, and then also upload their symptoms. I personally believe, I haven't seen the app, but I personally believe that they have personal data to be entered there so that they can be tracked after receiving the vaccination. But let me just put it out there right now that as of now, it is not available for general public. It's being available only as a backend software, but soon it's going to be rolled out. So please don't download whatever COVID apps are available, on the Play Store or because those are all fraudulent apps, and it's going to take possibly a while, maybe another few days. The app should be available for a person to be downloaded, and especially it will be helpful for people with comorbidities. And I believe that government in their guidelines will consider immunocompromised patients and IBD patients as well in those guidelines, which will have a preference in receiving their vaccination earlier than the regular general population.
That sounds great. So I will make sure I tell patients about that as well, as there have already been a few questions about that.
Not
Dr.
yet,
Nandi, are
not
there any
not yet to be
more
downloaded.
questions?
Sorry, what was that,
What's
Doc?
that?
No, I was just saying that not yet to be downloaded. Maybe in a
Yes,
couple of
yes. Fair enough.
another couple of days. Okay. Okay.
Fair enough. Thank you, Dr. Bhatia. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Nandi, have there been any other questions that have come in the interest of time? Because I think we're starting to run out of time now.
Correct. Yeah, we're about to close our session soon. No, I think we hit the majority of our questions. But if I am in error, I want our colleague. I want you to reach out to me. But before we close, though, reach out to me, and I'll go ahead and just DM me on my Facebook page, and I'll get back to you for sure, 100%. But I wanted to ask you, Tina. Thank you for guiding and moderating our discussion, because it's really important as Dr. Bhatia and as clinicians to try to do this so that we are addressing the concerns of our patients. What are your closing remarks? Like, what do you feel about this vaccine and what 21 is going to look like and 22 and beyond?
Initially I had my hesitations about, all the things that IBD patients are worried about that we discussed today. I think in speaking to a number of physicians in the GI community and a number of my own physicians for my various conditions, I have since learned I've had to roll up my sleeves the last month and really learn a lot about these vaccines. So what I'm saying to patients and encouraging patients to do is to have those open conversations with your doctors, because there is a lot of data out there about these vaccines. These trials have been very large, as Dr. Bhatia, as Dr. Nandi have mentioned. This is the scientific process that has been followed and has been followed thoroughly. We are going to learn a lot more about these vaccines over the upcoming months. But I think as citizens on this planet, and I think as IBD patients who may be immunocompromised or who may be on biologics, immunosuppression, I think it is for the sake of public health, welfare, and for our own safety, our duty to get this vaccine. And I wanted to sort of highlight an anecdote. I struggled many years ago with getting the influenza vaccine, and this was recommended to me by my gastroenterologist, and I hadn't gotten it in years because I had thought, oh my God, the influenza vaccine, the last time I got it made me so sick, just like Dr. Nandi was talking about earlier, but that was my immune response that went off. So about 5 years ago, what happened to me was I was flying home from San Diego and I caught the flu. I caught the flu so badly that I coded in the hospital. It came with symptoms of vertigo. I had the flu in my brain. I had the flu in my GI tract. I had explosive diarrhea for 5 days. I had vertigo for 4 months. That case of the flu nearly killed me. And I'm sharing this with you today because I believe in the power of vaccines, and I have learned the hard way, and I don't want anybody else to learn the hard way, that vaccines can really protect us, can really protect our families. And as Drs. Bhatia and Nandi have been saying throughout, 80% of the population is asymptomatic carriers of this virus. I don't want that burden on me. And I certainly don't think many people want that burden on them, that they have spread this virus to someone else. I think it is our duty to get vaccinated. And that would be my opinion as a patient advocate who's done thorough research and speaking to many doctors and reading about the vaccines. Thank you for asking me that question. I really appreciate that you value my input on this as well.
Oh, 100%. And many people value your input, Tina, not just in this virtual room, but around the world. So we're very lucky, and I know that's very deeply personal, and you've been through a lot, and it's very magnanimous and just speaks of your good heart that you share those personal experiences. It helps a lot of patients know that they're not alone, and that they're not the only ones who've had to go through very horrendous experiences. It also informs clinicians who tune in as to the feelings that are very sterile in the clinic room. The patient experience is very important. And I think to clinicians watching this, one reason I think Dr. Bhatia and I do this is to educate, but also to feel more connected to patient care. Before we go, I just did want to leave some resources for our audience. So a couple of things. We talked about IBD Partners here in the States, which is a database where you can they'll be taking into account COVID vaccine IBD recipients and tracking them long term. There's also, in addition to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, there's a global, this is not just US, there's also Crohn's and Colitis Foundation India, ccfindia.org. There's also different ones throughout the entire world. You can find a list of them in your respective country by going to Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, or if you go to fitwitmd.com, my website, we have resource link to all the Crohn's and Colitis Foundations around the world for your country. And then also there's the International Organization for the Study of Inflammatory Bowel Disease, which is an expert faculty consensus and consortium from around the globe of leading IBD experts who study this and develop guidelines that you can use, you can read. It's all free. It's all publicly accessible. So, with that, I really want to thank you, Tina, and I want to thank you, Dr. Bhatia, for tuning in and making time. This is just the first for our series. I also want to take a moment to thank our very excellent audience members who have actually helped highlight some of the wisdom that have come from my colleagues' mouths and brains. Thank you, audience, for tuning in, asking great questions. That's what makes this fun. That's what makes this relevant. If there's any audio or technical Wi-Fi issues, I apologize for them, but we're working them out still. But thank you. Stay tuned. In February, we'll release the date and time again soon. But we have another series planned that will look at South Asian inflammatory bowel disease. And if you are a South Asian member or not, doesn't matter. This platform is not just that, but because I have my colleague here from India, Dr. Bhatia, and Tina, who's also of South Asian descent, we have a separate program series for that community. But rest assured, we'll be bringing programming as it relates to all IBD patients. And of course, I thank you all. I'm Dr. Neilanjan Nandi. Dr. Bhatia and Tina, any closing remarks before we conclude?
I just want to thank Tina. I stumbled upon her page while I was just randomly browsing on FB one day, I think possibly last year. And ever since, my knowledge of IBD has grown by leaps and bounds. And more than COVID-19, it's very difficult to catch up with her posts. How do you do it? I really don't know. But whatever you're doing, it's fabulous.
She's amazing.
It's fabulous. She's amazing, right? And thank you, Dr. Nandi, too, for this fabulous setup. I'm getting inspired by the studio you are sitting in. It looks fab.
Well, thank you. Still learning.
Thank you so much for having me here today. And thank you for having me here. And I really appreciate it, and hope that we'll be able to address some of our patients' concerns.
Absolutely.
And get in more patients to come on this platform and, clear their doubts.
Absolutely. To all our audience, you can follow Dr. Bhatia at Dr. Sumit Bhatia and on Twitter, and also Tina at Own Your Crohn's, and myself at FitWitMD, all on Twitter, and many of us are on all other major platforms as well if you want the latest and greatest education information on inflammatory bowel disease. With that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Until next time, have a great day. Bye-bye.